And just to say, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Kelly. I'm the director of Breaking Ground, which is the new community-led housing hub for the Liverpool City region, which we launched yesterday. Hooray! In a better world, a different world, we would be having a whole weekend of events at Safe Regeneration, and we would have been having a big party and some drinks and food, but still come. But it still felt good yesterday to launch the event. And we are hosting a week-long series of activity through the Breaking Ground Festival to look at all aspects of community-led housing. And to really inspire and share information about what the possibilities are about community-led housing. So today's event is the first in-depth look at a particular project, and I'm really pleased that today we're talking about Safe Regeneration, the work they've been doing in Bootle, but across the area over the last 20 years or so. But first, to introduce, I'd like to welcome Peter Dowd MP, who's going to say a few words to introduce. And I'm particularly pleased Peter's here. Yesterday we had Ian Byrne, who's the MP for West Derby, and also who sits on the Housing Select Committee. And we had Mike Amesbury MP, who is the Shadow Minister for Housing and Planning, and is also the MP for Weaver Vale in Holton. So it's also great today to have Peter Dowd here, who is the MP for Bootle, the great place that is Bootle. And I will hand over to Peter to say a few words. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you very much, Paul. And can I, welcome everybody. It's really nice to see so many people, and on the fantastic initiative that Breaking Ground is. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I suppose where I wanted to start from is that, since though you mentioned Bootle, Paul, there's a context for me that's very important when we get the whole context of community housing and housing in general, if you want, for areas like Bootle into some sort of context. Because this year, May, I'm not quite sure we say we celebrate it, but we recognise, we commemorate this year the bombing of Bootle in 1941, a particularly bad bombing. In fact, per square acreage, per square mile, Bootle got the worst bombing in the Second World War than virtually anywhere else in the country, including London, to the extent that around about 85% of homes were either destroyed or damaged by bombings of the 17,000 to 18,000 houses that were in Bootle during the war. You can imagine there were something like 12, 13, 14,000 or more either destroyed or damaged in one fashion or another. So for us in Bootle, that was a big challenge to sort of get us back to some sort of normality. And I can remember I lived in Marsh Lane in Bootle, Audley Street, and I can remember as a child, I'm 64 this year, and I can remember as a child in the early 60s, there still being places that were the big gaps in the roads, basically, where the houses had been bombed. And in fact, at the bottom of my street, the whole of the bottom of the street, it must have been half a dozen houses were completely taken out. And when I was a child, people still talked about the bombed houses. Don't go and play on the bommies, I would be warned, because all these houses have been destroyed. And in fact, many of the houses around Elm Road, and in fact where St Mary's is, were terribly badly bombed. Many of the houses around which don't longer exist. They no longer exist. And of course, the church, St Mary's across the way, was completely destroyed in the Second World War. So you get the sense of how much destruction happened. But we were able, with the will and the resource, to actually build back, basically. And so when I left my house in Audley Street, we in them days called it the Slum Clearance. It's difficult to believe. But when you think back, they were pretty grim, some of these houses. And at that time, they'd actually only been up for less than a century, and they were pretty grim. People were put into these houses and they were grim. So that's the context for me. But it isn't just about government coming in to do the building, and it isn't just about local authorities coming in to do the building, and it isn't about the private coming in to do building. It's about what communities themselves can do, and the capacity and the facility and the empowerment given to community housing. And we can see that across, in fact, we can see it across the world, and we can see it across Europe in places, whether it's in Denmark, whether it's in the Netherlands, whether it's in parts of France, etc., and of course Italy. There is the capacity for communities to build their own homes, to be part of the design of their own homes, to be part of the ability, just their ability to be part of what makes their life part of their life. And I think there was a study undertaken not too long ago about the impact of housing on people. It was something like 12 out of the 2,000 people who were surveyed, something like 12 or 15% of them said that their houses, the way they lived, had an impact on their mental health. And as many as 1 in 4 people were affected in a negative way by their housing. So that's 1 in 4 people impacted upon by where they live and the house that they live in, their housing, so to speak. So it's important that we're not just throwing houses up. It's not that we should be saying to builders, you just get on with it, local authorities get on with it, the government get on with it. We've got to be able to say to communities, if they want to build, if they want to be part of this construction of this, the rebuilding of their lives, the rebuilding of their communities, they've got to be completely empowered to do that. And there are some governments across the world who actually facilitate that. The Netherlands government fulfill that role quite well with one of the national funds that it actually has specifically for community housing. We really don't in this country have that vision to do that. It's often been left to the private sector. We all know that with relation to council house building is virtually non-existent. It's beginning to come forward, but it's virtually non-existent. So the message for me, we had an area in Bootle which was devastated by the bombing of 1941 and 1940 for that matter, devastated. And we built up. We didn't build to the same level that we should have in terms of community engagement, but we really should. And we really do have the opportunity, if we really should have the opportunity to enable communities to build from scratch if they want. And I think that is why Destination Bootle is such a crucial flag and emblem for us. And I do hope, notwithstanding the decision made last week, that it will be able to get a second wind and it will be able to be built. And it will be able to be built by the community. And the message the community does have to send is, we want to be part of our own housing future, not just tenants or owners who pick a house that's on the market. They must be allowed to be part of their own housing future. So that's all I'd want to say. It's a great initiative we've got today. And I hope to listen to what other people have to say as well. So thanks very much for listening to me.
Fantastic, Peter. Brilliant. And I have to say, I mean, I live in Sefton too, but I didn't realise that Bootle had been so hit by the Blitz. And, you know, I'm going to certainly look into that history.
Yeah, too.
Amazing, amazing. But I really appreciate the sort of context you put there as well, which kind of is what Breaking Ground's all about, that there are so many possibilities for communities to take control. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Brian Dawe, who's the Chief Exec of Safe Regeneration, who's going to talk about the work that they've been doing. I first met Brian probably 20 years ago in another job, and it's just great to be back working under the Safe Regeneration banner, back in Bootle. I spent 10 years travelling to Preston from Crosby, and it just was too much. And I'm just so glad to be able to be working back with Safe, but being part of you know, that Safe family. And so I'll pass over to Brian, who's going to talk you through his last 20 years, I think.
Jesus. Hold on tight, everybody.
Questions in the chat as the conversation's going on.
I've got a little presentation to help me, just kind of nudge me along, and it's better looking at pictures than looking at me good stuff. Paul, could you give me control of the bridge, please, sir? How are we doing? Yes, thank you. Got it. Okay, let me know when you can see it. Thumbs up if you can. Yeah, we got it. Are we there?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to leave it in this mode with the sidebar as well, because when I click on beginning, it's got a timer on it. It just rushes away with itself. So hope that's okay. Thanks for that, Peter, and thanks for the introduction, Paul. I said I'm Brian. I'm from Safe, and I love this picture. It's not me, but it could easily have been me. And it just tells the story, as Peter's just described, in the city that that I grew up in. That was just a bit battered, but it's strange. As a kid, I always had that kind of belief that the library was like a phoenix, and someday it was going to rise up and it was going to take its place, and as a fantastic city. And as you can see with Liverpool, that's happened, and that's what I want for Bootle and for Seft, and I wanted to be able to kind of take its place on the stage. The international stage is a fantastic town, and in a fantastic part of the country. But I think there's something a little bit special that we can bring to it in terms of it being a real kind of a high standard of community-led initiatives that is a shining example for others to look at from the world and come and visit and admire. So Peter's just talked a lot about Bootle as a town and the last 60, 70 years. But there was two things that really stood out for me when we came to Bootle. And there was two things, as I say. 1% of the money in Bootle stays there. And that for me just said there was a lot of people coming into the way to the town, but then leaving. So I'll talk a little bit more about what we did to kind of change that in a moment. And the second was there's 3 generations of unemployment there, and that's because of the decline of the docks. And so they're the two things that we kind of straight away were thinking that this isn't right. This isn't. Let's see if we can have an impact on this. So Safe, we're artists. That's where we come from. We're creative people. We create artworks. We create music. And when I came back to the city in the 90s, nothing had changed from my childhood. And so I began to bring people together to see what we could do to make change, to even just give us a voice. Because I felt like a lot of people coming into the city, consultants and whatnot, creating reports, leaving reports and leaving. So we felt that we at least could give ourselves the opportunity to influence that and shape that. So we spent a lot of time creating public artworks, creating music festivals, engaging people in positive activity. This one's really one of my favourite ones that we did. This is a photo ceramic, and it celebrates Kirby's 50th anniversary, which was a couple of years ago, as a new town. And it links into what Peter said before about that clearance. So during the clearance, a lot of the new towns were built, Skelmersdale, Kirby, and so this was a really interesting response to its. I'm just letting someone in. Excuse me. To that kind of that movement of people, and we looked at a lot of interesting things as part of that as well. This is another one that we created out in Warrington. This is in a dementia care setting, and I'm still amazed that a hospital and a social care provider allowed us into their building, into their grounds, to create public artworks using iron. We brought a furnace into the car park and we created sculptures, and a lot of those sculptures were based upon on people's memories. And it wasn't, at first we were thinking about doing this really grand piece, but it didn't feel right. It didn't seem fitting. So what we did, we created lots of small pieces of memories. It might have been medals. I actually worked with one fella who played for Everton when he was 16, and he still had his medals. And it was just a joy to be able to work with him and create a piece of artwork that represented his life. And family members coming in to see the unveiling of the piece, we're really emotional about that. What's happening here? There's lots of things flashing up on the screen. So Safe and Bootle, we've been there for 16 years now. And we came to Bootle as part of the creation of a sculpture trail on the Liverpool Leeds Canal. We were only supposed to be there 6 months. It was a temporary arrangement with the reverends of the area to look after the school whilst we were kind of creating these pieces of artwork. Credit crunch came, developers scattered, and we were left to create what is now a cultural hub, as we call it. And what happened was, because we were so successful in generating projects and raising funds for projects, others started coming to us and asking us how we were doing it. So we began to help other people to set up their own businesses. And we formalised that. We actually now, it's one of our major incomes, and we partner with the women's organisation, and we provide startup support and growth support. And a lot of the organisations that we work with to provide that support, we retain with us, and they'll work alongside us to develop the projects and programmes that you'll see as part of this. Because one thing that we realised early on is that we had really big ambitions, and we felt we could really influence the direction of development in the town. But we knew that we'd have to kind of build our numbers up, build our membership, build up the community that we were working with, and raise their skills levels in order for people to participate in that process. And that's the important thing, one of the key kind of strategies that we deployed. Behind, in the background there, that is now the Lock and Key community pub, the only one in the region. That piece of ground was something we just adopted initially, and we took it under our control, because it became a spot for fly tipping, because we got a tip just down the road. So we found that people were just using that. When they couldn't get a tip, we could turn up and it'd be like mountains of tyres and fridges. So we began to just engage our community to say, no, this isn't good enough. Let's engage. Let's take control of this piece of land. And I actually brought one of the funders, Power to Change, to this space, and I stood on that spot with Vidya, and a lot of us will know Vidya. And I had a conversation with her, and I said, this is our piazza. There was mountains of tyres and fridges, and she just looked at me and shook her head. But thankfully for us, and thankfully for everyone involved in the pub, she got it. She seen the vision that we had, and so she kind of sanctioned the investment into Safe, which is, the pub is one of the things I'm most proud of, to be fair. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. As I said before, it's on the canal. And straight away when we arrived there, we were like, this is a beautiful stretch. Why aren't we looking after this? Why hasn't our community engaged in this? And for the longest time, and still to some extent, a lot of the buildings that were being created turned their back on the canal and kind of ignore the canal. And we think that's one of the biggest resources that we've got in the town centre of Bootle. So we were really keen on kind of facing up and utilising the canal. This came about, the Canals and Rivers Trust approached us, and I said, we're interested in the work we were doing and interested in working with us to create a canoe hub as part of the pub. So they invested through Richard Desmond £1.5 million to create a canoe trail from Liverpool all the way over to Goole on the East Coast. And that, again, that was a useful way of engaging our community in the canal. So despite because COVID had stopped, but every week, every Saturday, we got a canoe club. We get out on the canal, we engage with our community, we get kids to clean up, we bring bags and they fill the bags, and so therefore they're less likely to throw rubbish in the canal if they've just spent the weekend cleaning it up. It works, it really does work. And then mix into that, we still create artworks, and so that's that kind of, it builds up to a change of attitude, basically. We're changing people's attitudes towards the canal and towards the area. It's far less littered than it was because people are taking control and taking it into their own hands. So this is our community pub. Really proud of this. If you'd asked me, did I want to open a pub in Bootle 5 years ago, I would have probably said no. But our community came to us and said, this is really important to us. If we lose this, it's only going to make the area worse. So we as I said, we approached Power to Change, and it's probably one of the, it's the best thing that we've done. We have theatre nights there. It's been the catalyst for the music festival that would have been in its 4th year last year. But unfortunately, because of COVID, We've got plans for this year, 3rd and 4th of July. We're going to do a festival. We're doing a spectacular, whether we have an audience or not. And we're making plans to stream that. So that's been a really useful tool in changing the perception of Bootle. And that's a big job. In the same way, Liverpool had this perception during the 80s of a place, you know, that just was on its knees, didn't have much going for it. Bootle's had that same stigma, but we've kind of really worked hard to challenge that and change that. So as I said, what I didn't mention before is the school that we took occupation of in 2006. We raised the money in 2012 to purchase that school. So that meant we were a stakeholder. That meant we couldn't be moved on. That meant we were now engaged in what was that land to be used for, because we've seen far too often artists go to places where nobody else is really interested in going into, make change, and then it moved on shortly after, or not long after, for developers to get on and to do their work. So this was the first time we actually began to think about what could we do within this parcel of land that is around us. Let's begin to think about what's important, and let's engage our community in that process in making those decisions. So this is the first manifestation that rebuilds Safe on the canal side, creates and emphasises that piazza, and builds a hotel next to the pub. And that came about through some of our European work. We actually found a social enterprise model that was born in Italy. It's exactly that. It works with people and provides training opportunities, but it's also a commercial operation, a true community business. So we were interested in kind of bringing all the best bits from around Europe into the scheme. As part of that, the council were great with us. They made an arrangement to lease the land around the pub, so then we could utilise that. That then kind of subsequently was quashed because we got a little bit more ambitious. So this, you'll see, it becomes a lot more kind of ambitious in terms of the scale. What we began to do is imagine if we had the ownership of all the land, what we could do within this space. So as you can even see by the titles have changed very much. This is now a feasibility appraisal rather than a visioning document. So it became very technical. So we began to look at how we would approach this, what the economics were behind it, what the structure might be, and more importantly, what do the community want? So you'll see there the pub, our community pub, is transformed. It builds to the right of it. It includes the hotel, as we mentioned. But ground floor, we put our brewery there. One of our tenants within the hub is actually a brewer. So we wanted to kind of just change the tone completely, because you know a pub's one thing, but if you put a microbrewery and you start a real ale, introduce that into the mix, it changes the dynamics. It changes how the perception of drinking establishments somewhat. So this was a really important important image, and you'll just see in the bottom right hand corner there's a guy with his jumper tied around his shoulders, and someone pointed out as part of the publicity that won't happen in Bootle. I said not now, but maybe. It's challenging those perceptions all the time, but not moving people out the way to make these changes. Bringing people in to make those changes, and that's the really important part of it. So I'll just look at the actual layout. It kind of replicates the density around it, you'll see. And you'll see K is the pub. A1 would be our new build, and I'll show you some more images again in a minute. But the blue buildings there, townhouses, and we have apartment block J and H. 101 homes. The L block is extra care, so there's 80 within that. So in total, we were talking about creating 187 dwellings. But just as part of our visioning and questioning and talking through what we wanted from a site like this and a development like this, it was the green credentials. What we didn't want to create was a site that wasn't future-proof, or we want to future-proof the site, sorry, I should say. So that meant looking at energy. and we looked at the energy requirements, and we looked at what was out there in the market currently. So we opted for a geothermal heating system on this, and we also looked towards putting solar PV on the roofs. That then created, and we began to look at how we would do that. And so we looked at commercializing the energy options and how we would go about doing that. We set a company up called Colore Verde. Colore Verde drew an investment for schemes like this and looked at a repayment over a number of years that would pay for the kit to be put in place, because it's more expensive than your traditional energy. And so that would then offset the carbon. It's completely carbon neutral, and it also offset the investment needed over a period of time. So this site is completely gas free. It's fossil fuel free. Something else we introduced a carpool, an electric carpool of 5 cars to try and really bring down the need for car ownership. And those cars would then be charged by the solar PV that was on the apartment blocks. So we really, really looked at what the future looks like in terms of energy and car ownership, because Sefton, our council, have signed the climate change or the climate emergency agreement, which is really important to us all. We've spent millions of pounds on cycle infrastructure. And so we wanted to connect with those strategies and connect with those commitments by our councils to say, yeah, let's align ourselves with those things. Let's look about doing away with mass car park. Let's look at doing away with introducing fossil fuel into these sites. Let's really think about what the world would look like in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Because the reality of it is the climate change is now. It's like we're late as it is. We're late to the party already about doing something about it. So we really have to focus hard on creating developments that are future-proof and fit for purpose for the future. These are the lovely images that we created. Our architects, Ellis Williams, outstanding architectural practice. They've never had a planning committee permitted. Sorry, they've never had a planning application refused. So the one on Thursday was their first application that they've ever had refused, which was disappointing, but we're in the process of reviewing that. We're taking legal counsel, and we're confident on review of that we'll get it over the line, all being well and good. But there was some comment and focus around private amenity space. The council's policy is for huge gardens, and I'm talking 60 square meters, or was it 20 square? No, 20 square meters for private garden space, which we felt we needed to challenge, and we were more interested in creating communal space rather than private amenity space, because the community we want to encourage is that interaction. And so we wanted to create those public spaces where people could, begin to think about being together, connected to the pub, and so it's a cradle to grave kind of site as well, because within the hub we have a nursery, and obviously with the extra care we'll be looking to people into the later years. So it's really about that interaction. We didn't want to ghettoise anyone or move anyone. It's about that interaction. It's about that space. And so this is the piazza and the frontage to the canal. As you can see, we haven't built on top of the canal. We've left that space there. And if we go back to this overhead shot, what we've got here is retail and residential opportunities. So you could have, an ice cream parlour. We do plan to have a cycle repair shop and all those kind of things, cycle maintenance. That's something else that we wanted to do. We wanted to give each household a grant or for people to buy their own bikes. So we were encouraging people out of cars onto cycles and onto public transport. And that's a big part of the ethos and the thinking behind the scheme. And this is the hub. This is Safe's new building, canal side. It would host all the things that we have currently, and it would build upon that. We've got some fantastic creative people and some fantastic organisations based within Safe at the moment, and just connecting with the kind of approach to working with local people and developing enterprise. what we do is we develop enterprise based upon need, and if that need is a social need, well, then that's how we kind of work with local people to meet that local need through enterprise. This is all about the commercial approach to social problems. That's the big over kind of driver with this. This is the technical stuff. It might be boring to some people, but I've got a bit weird and a bit about all this group structure stuff, because we couldn't take on an operation like this without thinking about how we want to actually do it. So just in terms of structure, you have the charity based at the top. We have, which has community representation. We have Safe Community Homes, CLT, which was established a year today, funny enough. And that's in the process of becoming registered with the regulator. On the other flank, we've got 123 Accommodation, which has acted as our developer. And so, traditionally, developers come in, develop out, and take the profit and take that elsewhere. We were interested in developing this, retaining the profit and reinvesting it back in our community. But what we've also done as part of this now, that developer now offers services to other community-led housing associations and developments and initiatives. Chloride Verde, that's a really interesting one. I talked about that briefly before. We set that up to provide a mechanism to commercialise the geothermal energy on site. Just by chance, we managed to have a conversation with Alder Hey about their energy needs. We're now on site with Alder Hey, putting geothermal in place there. That's a £7 million investment. That was a fluke, complete fluke. We set it up to service destination Bootle. We had a conversation with Alder Hey, and now that's actually up and running, which is amazing. And then we have the asset management company down here. So it's a bit of a complex setup, really, but it needs to be based upon what Safe does. And in some ways, if you look from the outside, it looks like Safe's empire building, but it's doing exactly the opposite. Every time it gets an opportunity to package up an enterprise and kick it out, it does that. And the hub itself, breaking ground itself, is a project that Safe is incubating. 5 years time, 10 years time, when it's ready, we'll kick it out and it'll be independent and it'll do its own thing in its own way. But with one thing we have to do, and it's our responsibility to do, is embed that the community focused approach. And that's our role, I think. My final slide, you'll be glad to know. This is the chaos that sits in my head. I apologise to everybody. And I often sit with the team and go, this is what's going on. And they're just like, man, it's just a little bit, yeah. But this is a mechanism. That's all it is, for engaging local people, but taking people on, moving people from where they are, raising aspirations, raising skill levels, and truly kind of bringing people through and to be the best that they can. Our overriding statement is we believe that people deserve to live in a healthy, happy neighbourhood, and that message kind of represents all that, believe it or not. But there's the hub here. This big block here is about people training, volunteering, employment. Just Friday, we've just announced that we've got another tranche of funding coming through from Europe, probably our last, to be honest. But that will enable us to provide a training program for artists, and it's based upon our approach of being entrepreneurial with creative skills. So we'll Safe. We always say that we're quick to learn and we're quick to share. That's our motto. Destination Bootle obviously is a huge part of that. But once that becomes sustainable, it'll be kicked out. It'll be its own entity and it'll do its own thing. But the important thing is that we embed that it's community led, it's community focused, and investments and profits that are generated from it get reinvested. This is the way forward. We can't depend upon councils. As Peter said, the councils are under so much pressure now. So all we want to do is provide opportunity for local people to sustain themselves through enterprise. And I'm really, really passionate about that. When we provide our business support, our opening statement is, who's your client? If you don't have a client, you don't have a business, but that's okay. It's just a hobby. But our approach is very much about who's your customer, how can we provide value to our communities, and that's me, Paul, in a nutshell. I know, really quick and complicated, but that's
Brilliant, Brian. Brilliant. Show of hands for Brian, please, I think. Fantastic. So, do you want to stop sharing your screen? Can you? Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, fantastic. I think what was interesting for me is it came out a bit in the chat that actually communities are wanting to see neighbourhoods built. This is nothing new. There was, you know, we know this, but actually what keeps happening is houses are just thrown up on pieces of land and no thought to the wider context. And I think what's organically grown here is this incredible kind of vision for what a neighbourhood could look like. And what for me, and I did some work in Bootle as well quite a while back, but also harnessing the incredible assets that that place has, the heritage assets. You know, I remember when I was doing some work in Bootle a while back, and the canal extension into the Albert Dock was being muted. But also at that time, British Waterways was advising you put your foot down to get through Bootle if you wanted to go to the Albert Dock for canal users. And I remember we did a project where we looked at the idea of, well, let's have a bypass. Let's fill in the canal in Bootle if everybody's going to turn their back on it. And it's just so exciting to see the potential of what could be kind of triggered by a community-led development. So, and I think this sort of approach to what Breaking Ground's all about has to be the solution in all our communities, because what you're going to get is that deeper regrowth of neighbourhoods and people in those places, and that swirling around of the skills and the investment and the wealth in those communities is what's going to make them thrive into the future. So we've got about 20 minutes, so I'm going to shut up. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments? Just put your hand up, put through the reactions. Who wants to kick off? Hello? Is somebody speaking? No? Anybody?
I'll ask a question if I can. I'd just like to know more about the Italian hotel model. How they support? What's that support there?
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Yeah, Le Mat, which means the mad one in French, believe it or not. And it was born out of when we were kind of bringing care into the community in terms of decanting people out of institutes, mental institutions. It was happening in exactly the same way in Italy, in a place called Trieste, which is northeast, I believe. But they said it was a tourist place, so they came up with this idea to set up a hotel. So it was literally patients running a hotel, and so it became a model that they've transferred and shared across Europe. So it exists in many places, and so we were interested in bringing it to the UK. So we secured the franchise for UK. So we're actually the first UK, the Le Mat. And then once we establish it here, we want to speak to everyone about sharing that model. But it's really, really interesting in that it's training, it's enterprise, but it's also working with the most vulnerable within communities to provide that support. So proper inspirational. So if I travel anywhere, the first thing I do is to see if there's a Le Mat there. There's a great one in Gothenburg as well. There's a couple in it's Le Mat, LEMAAT. Just check it out. It's proper.
Just curious, I mean, it's probably competition if you've got the franchise, but Fair B&B Co-op is like Airbnb with an F in front of it. It's an Italian co-op model, and they're looking to sort of get into the UK, and they support a lot of community groups and stuff. They put money back in rather than sucking it all out, which is quite interesting.
What's that called? Fair
B&B. It's .co-op. I can put it in the chat.
There's no such thing as competition, just an opportunity to improve your services. That's what I say. Raise your game, Nick.
Okay, Barbara wants to ask a question, have a comment.
Thanks, Paul. My comment is, we are talking about homes, but it's not forgotten, but it's very much our heritage. Because I run Bootle YMCA. It's a very, very old building. And as I said yesterday, the plaster is coming off in chunks rather than flakes. We've had problems with the roof for years. So we needed a future. And I work closely with Liverpool YMCA, and they've helped us over the years when we have literally been struggling. And as I say, we needed a future. And we couldn't see us going anywhere until the beautiful Jane Dorr said, come with us. And I sort of, come with us where? Come with us onto the canal and the Carolina Basin. And you know, when all of a sudden the flashlight goes on and you think, that's absolutely perfect. We have the biggest group of scouts and cubs in Bootle, in the area. And one thing that they love to do is play on the water, canoeing or whatever. So the seed was planted. And now I am looking at that as our future in the hub. The Bootle YMCA will live on there in the heart of Bootle, as we always have been in the heart of Bootle. And if this doesn't happen, well, no, forget that. This is going to happen in the future, onward and upward. And I can only say that the passion of Brian and Jane rubbed off on us long ago. And the only question I asked was, can we work together? YM, and so what would happen, you know, after this? But the area, you can't understand how this project should happen unless you have involved. And we have been involved with the Lock and Key pub. We've seen it go from strength to strength. Bootle is our heart, and this project has got to happen. And if you need someone to march with a sandwich board all around Bootle, and all around the councillors, and all around the town hall and the planning committee, you know, I'm your man. But please understand, this is a fabulous project.
I'll take it up on that, Bob, I think. The sandwich board. I'll get one drawn up Monday.
Thanks very much, Barbara.
Can I just respond to that very briefly, just to say that what Barbara's saying there, it just really sums up how much we can harness this passion that there is in communities to be able to shape and develop where they live, where they work, where they create. And you know, that's a part of it. A part of it is the YMCA is very dear to Barb and Ken, and rightly so. And a part of their future is about looking at where those services are going to develop. But that's the whole point, really, isn't it? It's about, this is a neighbourhood. This isn't about putting up houses. And I think in terms of the decision that we got from planning last week and the conversations we've been having for so many months and leading up and since, it does rather show those gaps between looking to the future of what neighbourhoods should be, what people want them to be, what the people who are going to live there, work there, play there want them to be, and maybe what the sort of planning guidelines suggest currently. It seems as though there's a lot of learning to be done in that respect. I've no doubt that we will be successful in our appeal, and we look forward to spending a lot of time with Barbie and Ken. Who doesn't?
Thanks, Jane. Can I just bring in Steph, who's raised her hand for a question?
Yeah, hi. Apologies if there's any noisy children in the background. I just wanted to ask a question. I think a lot of the plans and the development is about bringing people together. And do you think part of the planning decision was maybe because it was done on a remote basis, so people maybe hadn't had the opportunity to be on site more or see the actual physical difference that it could make? And as a build on that as well, I just wondered how you've kept some of those community partners together in this strange COVID world where you used to have your hubs and people coming in and out of the pub and things, how you've managed to do that and to keep people together during COVID.
Thanks, Steph. I'll pick that up. I think, yeah, that hasn't helped not being able to, you know, for the committee not to get on site. But I think in some ways we've set committees up to fail because we're asking to make complex decisions on really complex schemes. And so we've got to ensure that the committees that are making these decisions know what it's based upon. And so if we're asking people to think forward 20, 30 years, it's a big ask for people, you know. And I watched the planning committee last week, and I think there was about 10 schemes getting fired after them, quick after bang, 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 bang. So you're asking people to make big decisions on big schemes really, really quickly. And so I think we're setting people up to fail, to be honest. That's my thoughts on that anyway. And in terms of keeping people together, every Friday the pub opens. It's online, by the way, and we get the guitars out, and we make sure everyone's got a drink, even if it's a cup of tea. And we have a twang, and we have a sing along. But we do all sorts. We're really good on social media, but you know, we've got a newsletter that goes out. But that's our game, is people keeping people connected. I think our last post that we put out on Friday about the refusal, 45,000 people engaged in that.
Brilliant.
That's what we do really well. We've got a stakeholder membership that we constantly keep up to speed with where we're up to with everything, and every decision we make, it gets fired out, it comes back to us. To be dead honest with you, early conversations with the architects, they said let's get rid of the pub and build a new one on the canal side. There was uproar. My mum's been drinking there so we just went, you're right, you're absolutely right. Rather than build a new building, why would we take that away, take the character out the area? So yeah, that's what we do. That's the most important part of what we do, to be fair.
Hey, anybody else got any other thoughts? One of the things I just wanted to sort of pick up on, I'll come to you in a second, George, was also, you know, Brian's point about planning committees, and you know, this is kind of how we do things in this country. And I think, you know, big projects do get delivered and get developed through the system. I think my comments as a Sefton resident was I was just very surprised at the lack of real depth of conversation in the meeting, actually, when you've got that amount of investment coming into one of what's on paper described as one of the most deprived communities in the country. And I hate that analogy because I don't like that language, but it, you know, I thought at least, if anything, they would have just said, let's go and look at the site and have a bit of a site visit, because that was possible. So I think from that point of view, there is something about skilling up our councillors and people involved in helping to make those big decisions. But George, I notice you've got your hands raised. You want to come in and?
Yeah, thank you. Saved me trying to type on an iPad. So I've done 4 viewings of houses in Bootle in the last 6 months. What my idea is to get a large sort of merchant's house, which Bootle's got plenty of, and to have that as essentially a senior housing cooperative with quite good facilities, and just see what we can do. I can afford sort of to do it, and then if it begins to work, then to get more houses nearby, and just to develop a community of older people or of single people. I think that part of the housing issues in the country are that there are lots of houses, and a tremendous number of them just have one older person in them, which is neither suitable for the person themselves as they get older, and runs the risk of isolation and all the various issues of that. And really, that I think the mutual support that we could get from living together as older people and finding ways to do that would be, well, it's what I want. I can't see much of a future for living on my own, though it's great at the moment, but somewhere down the road, it would be really nice for someone to say, "How you doing, George? Do you want a cup of tea?" You know, and so this. So I'm not looking at new build, because I don't think I have the time or energy to do the project management of that. I just really want to think, it seems obvious to me to find an existing property and just go in there. And of the group that we have, we're all from North Liverpool. So that's my idea, and hoping we could find a way to fit in somehow. I'm not sure how that is, but I hope you don't mind me making this announcement just because it seems to fit. Thank you.
Yeah. No, and we've been talking, George, haven't we, about when the time is right and you're ready to promote your scheme or to get new people to join, we will certainly help you, definitely. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Any other thoughts and comments? I just wondered, Brian, is it worth saying, so what's the next step? You know, Barbara's here, Ken's here. After yesterday and the energy that was in the room yesterday, you know, and the energy here and the positivity, you know, this is just a blip in the road.
Sure.
So what's the next steps? What's your process now?
The next steps now is we undertake a review. We've taken legal counsel, and early suggestions are this, you know, on appeal we'll get it through. So it apparently goes to a national panel now for discussion and review. But just something I'd like to just make you aware of. We use a framework called the Thrive framework, which is about tendering, procurement. And so we're the commissioning authority. They've actually committed the funds to support us in this appeal. So which is absolutely amazing, because that was the first. We've already started, as you do with these schemes, you think, if we don't get this through, how are we going to find the money to do it? Well, we found that money already. It took us literally 12 hours, and that's been donated to us. So we're absolutely over the moon about that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Really good news. And I think what's also, you know, through setting up the hub here, we've been very connected into the national movement, particularly the Community Land Trust Network and the Confederation of Cooperative Housing, who also are very, very supportive of this scheme. It's one of the things that we want to try and make happen in England is the scale of these schemes becoming bigger, potentially. And all schemes don't have to be bigger, but actually a scheme like this should be enabled to happen. So there's a lot of interest nationally also behind this, and a lot of people who will be working with us. And, you know, this should be an exemplar scheme for the country, and why not it happen in Bootle? Absolutely, absolutely.
No, you're right, Paul, and we recognise the significance of that. That, you know, we are leading the way on it, and for a lot of communities, and so it can't fail. Full stop.
No way, no way. No.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Can I just say I was very pleased to see Karen from the Planning Committee give up her time to find out a bit more about our project. And I welcome that and say support would be good, especially from the people, well, the councillors in Bootle. That's all.
Mark, if I can say something there, that in my view, I'm an artist as well, so I sort of really understand the momentum and the ideas that you've got here. And it was a very difficult meeting from that point of view, personally speaking. But of course, in a planning situation, you've got to be objective. There's a whole set of rules you've got to listen to. And you're right, it's lack of information. It's lack of knowing, you know. That's why I've come along today, and I want to know more about, you know, what you're doing and understand. And I live in Southport, it's miles away, isn't it? And, you know, there is all of that sort of discussion over projects in Bootle, projects in Southport, all of that kind of discussion. I am from Coventry originally, and know about you know, how important is regeneration. I lived in a housing estate that, you know, on the north side of Coventry that benefited from lots of arts projects, and these kind of regeneration, arts-based regeneration projects are absolutely fantastic. And I really wish you all the best with it. I really want to be able to come to Destination Bootle. I want to learn more about what you're up to. For what it's worth. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
No. I think it's brilliant that you came very much. Yeah. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, I really want to thank Brian and Peter Dowd, the MP, for today. But it has been great hearing all about this, and we've recorded this today, so we will share that. And I appreciate people giving up their time. The festival continues, so tomorrow we've got 2 events. We've got an afternoon session where I'll be looking at all the community-led housing models, because there's a lot of them. So people are welcome to that. That's at 2 o'clock. And then tomorrow evening, we've got Dr. Matt Thompson, who's talking about the hidden history in Liverpool of community-led housing going back to the 60s. He's written an amazing book on that. And from 6 o'clock, he'll be stimulating a discussion about why we don't have more of these schemes and how do we mainstream this approach to how we build our neighbourhoods. So that's going to be a really fascinating, provocative discussion, I think. But thank you so much. It is very inspiring what SAFE have created and achieved, and it will happen. And onwards and upwards. Have a great Sunday, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.